Hello, and welcome to the Argyle Accounting Technology Summit. My name is Nick with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I would like to introduce our moderator, Tony Aponte, Chief Accounting Officer, Attentive. We're really excited to have Tony today and our panelists for a panel discussion titled Future of Accounting, Automating Traditional Processes. Welcome, Tony. Over to you.
Great, thanks, Nick. As Nick mentioned, I am Tony Aponte. I'm the Chief Accounting Officer at Attentive. And then prior to that, I was a partner at EY. So I have a passion about automation. I've seen it both external as an auditor and internal as a CAO. And so I'm super excited for the discussion today. And so without further ado, I'll let our panelists introduce themselves. Dan?
Hi, everybody. Dan Johnson, Director of Content Accounting at Roku. Roku has the Roku channel, which is one of the largest AVOD television platforms in the United States. And I'm responsible for all of the accounting associated with the Roku channel. And one of the tasks that I've recently worked on was completely automating the accounting and payment function of that system. And so excited to talk a little bit about that. Before Roku, I was at Netflix. I have spent most of my career in the entertainment industry, as well as Disney and Fox.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Thomas, and I help people go on vacation. You know, who doesn't like a good vacation? I work at Travel and Leisure, and I head up the accounting and finance department for a recently acquired business line that supports people booking online hotel and other travel accommodations. Prior to that, I had positions as a vice president FP&A at various other companies, but looking forward to the discussion panel today.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Thomas. So Thomas, I'll start with you for the first question, and Dan, obviously feel free to chime in as well. So Thomas, from your experience, how has finance evolved over the last couple of years, and what new tools, technologies, or automations are most prevalent?
Wow, great question. Thanks, Tony. Yeah, I'll get into it a little bit. So one of the most notable shifts I've seen over the past few years is that shift towards digitalization and automation. You know, in the past, accounting and financial reporting were typically done with spreadsheets, or even pad and paper in some instances. So what I've seen is with the rise of cloud computing and data analytics, the organizations are shifting to adopting more sophisticated tools, technologies to streamline those financial operations. You know, this shift, I believe, is leading to a more improved accuracy, efficiency, and transparency in financial reporting. It also gives a little path to faster financial decision making. So what I've seen, one of the most prevalent tools for me in finance is cloud-based accounting software. So that allows a business to manage those financial operations from anywhere in the world. We saw with COVID, you had to get it out of the office and into your house. So that was really imperative that the cloud-based accounting software came to the forefront. And I just finished implementing on my current role, Oracle NetSuite. And that has really helped us out tremendously. I'll get a little more into that later on, as well as some Hyperion cloud planning and some other cloud-based solutions around commission payments, et cetera. Another significant trend I mentioned earlier, but to touch on even more, is business intelligence. Particularly programs. I've used Power BI, but what that does is it automates those financial tasks, such as reconciling bank accounts, creating financial reports. You know, so for me, right now we have Oracle NetSuite does all of our three-way matching or bank reconciliations. It's really great. Power BI does a lot of our financial dashboards now, which I used to have to do in Excel. So for me, right out of the gate, those two technologies really help the organizations save money, reduce errors, and really lead to more accurate and reliable financial information. Dan?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I think a lot of things you touched upon, I've seen as well. So, you know, the cloud-based accounting systems, I think have become really prevalent in the last couple of years. I remember when I first started accounting, there was always this idea that all of the workflows would be in the cloud, or all of the workflows would be, somewhere digitized. And really, it wasn't until the last couple of years that I saw that dream kind of accomplished. And I think it was really COVID also that really pushed kind of my workflow to a complete digitization world. I'm in entertainment, so sometimes we're a little bit of a lag behind of most other industries in taking on new technologies. But once we had to force into the cloud computing world, I think we went so with gusto. And so really seeing a lot of those new systems, utilizing a lot of those new systems. Everything now is available to all of us at all times of the day. So Power BI I have on my phone for those automated dashboards, reconciliations through the Power BI. A lot of these systems we're using constantly. So really excited about how those are kind of going forward. One thing that I want to touch upon, but it's relatively new. We're playing it with it right now, but it's the hot topic right now is ChatGPT, and kind of how ChatGPT is impacting some of the workflows we're using right now. And so I've really been digging into it, and my team has been digging into it from automation of memos and automation of like contract review that we can kind of speed up from those points of view. And beyond that, really using some different tools like Miro for workflow automation and tracking the workflows and systems like that.
Yeah, and I'll echo that, Dan and Thomas. The business intelligence tools like Power BI I use a lot too when I was at EY, Click, Tableau is a bunch of them out there. And then similarly, Dan, and actually at Attentive, we're experimenting now with ChatGPT too. So it's funny to hear kind of the same things in all different avenues. Great. So Dan, so maybe I'll start with you for the second question. So what do successful, efficient, and streamlined finance processes look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. Definitely from a efficient, streamlined kind of point of view. First off, the workflow needs to make sense from from a standpoint of are we really great, spending a lot of time on this workflow? Would automating speed up the workflow? Maybe it's a 2-hour a week task. Do we need to automate everything, or should we really kind of pick and choose what we're automating? So a workflow needs to be material from like a monetary standpoint and a workflow standpoint and a work hour standpoint. Are they well defined? So does everyone have kind of their driving lane? Does everyone along that workflow process know what they're doing and what they're responsible for? And is it flexible? So the business is always changing. Content is specific, where every new deal could be very individual. And so we need to create a process that allows for that flexibility and allows for the business to change along with it. But generally, what we want to see is a workflow that speeds up the time to perform the output and kind of has the least amount of errors associated with it. So when we pull that together and create KPIs to see how workflow is tracking, are we having a material change from the regular output? And is it better to do this workflow from an automation standpoint than to hire a contractor? Is throwing bodies at the problem better, or is it creating an infrastructure that's better? So those are all things that we're trying to think about when we're streamlining a workflow.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, Dan.
Thomas?
Yeah, Dan, great response there. So how I think about, successful, efficient, and streamlined, really kind of several key elements to that. And to your point, Dan, they have to be clearly defined and standardized procedures for all financial transactions, from accounts payable, accounts receivable, for them to be successful, efficient, and streamlined. We should have an effective use of technology in that, some sort of effective use, some sort of automation of those routine tasks, all around the data analytics, just so you can gain that insight into performance. They should be strong internal controls around that to prevent fraud. So what else do we think about successful, efficient, streamlined? There should be effective communication and collaboration between finance and other departments, making sure that that's how you get it streamlined. Everybody is in the same boat, paddling towards that same goal. And finally, there should be ongoing monitoring. To your point, Dan, make sure you monitor it, make sure you analyze it, make sure it's doing what you want it to do, and it's moving towards what your company strategic goals are. So that's how I think about successful, efficient, and streamlined financial processes.
I do like that point you made about monitoring, like especially if we think about when we create a workflow, like where does a human belong, right? So like a human at some point, I believe, needs to be at those decision-making points along the workflow or from a review capacity. So we want to get to the point where maybe a human isn't making as many inputs as possible, and the human is more of a reviewer of and monitoring and giving the data analysis of what's going on in the process, and pull them completely out of maybe the specific inputs along the way of the workflow.
Yeah, it's like a simple concept. Why don't you just monitor it? But what I've seen is people just so busy that those postmortems of these processes is just like it just gets overlooked. Everyone just rushing to the next thing, heads down. So, but yeah, I mean I think you're right on. That's such a key piece to get that whole kind of successful, streamlined, and efficient. Got to have that monitoring.
I couldn't agree more. And one thing also I feel that you guys mentioned was making sure your cross-functional stakeholders align with you too. I think also critically important, you mentioned too.
Yeah, I agree, Tony. I know, we'll probably get into this a little bit later as well, but yeah, that cross-functional business partner is key, and getting everyone aligned is key. And a lot of it still comes down to influence and negotiation and making sure that everyone is aligned in the different processes. Sometimes when you're creating these processes, you have to make sure that different teams actually end up maybe having to do new work because where they belong in the workflow, they might have to, they're already inside the system. Just a few different inputs just kind of opens up the system for everyone else. So it's that give and take with the cross-functional partners and building those relationships and negotiating with them how to best create those systems.
Yep, that makes sense to me. And Thomas, maybe I'll start with you for the next one, but when you think about the traditional finance processes, where would you start and why with regard to automation?
Yeah, no, that's another great question, Tony. And actually, one of our questions from the viewers is what process should we not be automated or not be automating? But we'll flip it here because he asked what should be automated first, and then if it's not first, then maybe we push it. But so to me, I believe it's important to prioritize processes that are repetitive, they're time consuming, and they're prone to errors. Hey, if you're in that category, you're primed to be automated. So that could include tasks such as data entry, some accounts payable, receivable management, invoice processing, and some financial reporting. And we can get further into what should not be automated, but some of the financial reporting should not be. But anyway, the main reason why I mentioned the ones above about automating the processes is because it can really reduce the time significantly to have those efforts done. It would also minimize the risk of human error with the data entry, et cetera. But ultimately for me, that key is to identify the processes that are most impactful to your organization and prioritize those first for automation. What is going to help your company get to their strategic goal? And if it's something different, I mean, like if ChatGPT can do something different, I would say move in that fashion. But for me, that's how I position what I would automate first and why.
Yeah, and just to kind of jump in on that, I will kind of opine on something that shouldn't be automated. So if you look through a process and you kind of visualize kind of the costs of doing the process from an automation standpoint, and sometimes even doing the process from a people standpoint, does the process need to be done at all? So sometimes we'll look at, there's an example in content where we go out for tax credits to the states, and we produce content in a state and we go out for tax credits. We did an analysis one time at a previous company where we looked at all of the effort, all the auditors associated with getting that tax credit. And at the end of the day, we said, let's not even do this process. Let's not even go for the tax credit, because at the end of the day, the money we're receiving is not anywhere near the amount of effort that we're putting into it. So like, our processes even need to be done. So can we look at something and just scrap that process altogether and reallocate our resources to things that are more efficient and actually drive the business forward? For processes that should be automated, getting back to that, yeah, obviously, like I'm 100% on board with Thomas's view of what's repetitive. You know, what are those items that are the easiest to automate from not maybe not an AI perspective, but from a systematic perspective. Like if the calculation is a if then kind of calculation, that's much easier for a system to automate than something that's more creative through a chat GPT function. So like if this invoice comes in, then this payment goes out. If this accrual comes in, then this reconciliation happens afterwards. Focus on those things. Those are like the low-hanging fruit, and then from there kind of build off and become more and more creative or more complex in your analysis of a workflow.
Yeah, that makes sense, Dan, because it depends on where your company is in that process. Like like I said, if you have low-hanging fruit, that's a no-brainer. You don't even think about what should we not automate. It's like, well, just once you get rid of what you should automate, then you've got your bucket list of like, hey, what's left here and what can we do? And then you do that cost analysis. Like for me, when we implemented Oracle NetSuite, we were able to automate some invoices out to our clients before they manually type them in. But now we have our transactions in. We can apply an item rate to it and push it out. Same with supplier payables. We get direct bills from some of our hotel suppliers. NetSuite does that full reconciliation of the thousands of transactions that we're getting billed for. Does it right inside. But prior, we had to do it in Excel. So it's really like where do you go? Where are you at now? Where can you go quickly? And then figure out what's that end goal.
Yeah, totally. And I think another point that I just want to kind of raise also is what are we optimizing for, right? Like if you step back, many companies have different strategies and many departments in a company have a different strategy. So when we're looking at a workflow, what's the goal of the optimization? Are we optimizing for OpEx efficiency? That's 90% of the time what we're trying to optimize for. But sometimes we could optimize for strategic decision making. So that workflow looks completely different than what we're optimizing for from a efficiency standpoint. And so like really step back and also say like, what is the goal of the optimization? Is that at the end of the day that we automate and create more efficient structure? Do we want more information? Do we want to move like a specific key like skill set up the ladder of strategic decision making? Those are all different strategies, and those all have different optimization automation workflow processes that need to be taken into consideration of.
Dan, I'll start with you with a follow-up here. Thomas, I'd love to hear your experience on this too. So Dan, what are the biggest challenges you face when you're implementing a new technology initiative?
Yeah, I touched on this a little bit before. I think it is still a lot of the negotiation, the influence. It's vision, right? It's leadership and vision. And like, can everyone see the vision that you have? Can you explore the vision with the different teams and show them the value of this automation or this technology initiative, right? Most, I think, can be complacent or can be stuck in their ways, and they just need a motivation in order to kind of move in the direction that the company needs. And once they're kind of on your path and seeing your direction, I think most people are excited for innovation and kind of what the technology can do for them specifically. And so it's really getting support from a cross-functional basis in order to allow that technology to move forward. And really, with the automation we're doing now and some automations of the past, really it's what is this doing for the company? What is this doing for the individual cross-functional business partners? And how do I get them to have skin in the game, right? So like, I want them to use the system. I want them to get rid of the system that they were having before and live inside my technology. That way they have skin in the game. They can iterate, they can raise questions or have issues and kind of change the system as needed. But I want them to like own their version of the system and really, be part of the solution. So that's kind of the main issues that I've seen with technology initiatives. Oh, and
Yeah, I
then
like
I
that.
think just I had not to go on any further, but I also think that setting expectations is a big one. Like setting expectations, everything always drags on, everything always takes longer by 2 times than we think it is going to be. So like it's really setting expectations with the those who are funding the projects, and just constant communication to make sure that everyone knows where you're at on a specific task over time.
Yeah, I like that, Dan. I like being part that having everyone be a part of the solution. So everyone's working towards one goal. But this one made me laugh. What are the biggest challenges that you face when you implement a new technology? I mean, I feel like it's like flip like it's easier to list the things that are not a challenge when you're doing this, because it's like every little thing pops up as a challenge when you're trying to implement a new technology. If you're going from base zero up to a brand new technology. But some of the few things I would highlight to pivot off you, Dan, is ensuring that staff are trained and comfortable using the new technology. I think that's a key part. Well, I think we'll get to the communication a little bit further in the discussion. But for me, like when we implemented any cloud solution, I've always made sure to purchase the training program that comes along with it. So, for example, like Oracle NetSuite, they've got a whole cloud computing training platform. You can get certified in a couple different areas. So making sure that's available. Relatively inexpensive, but that right off the bat, when you introduce that, it's like, hey, this technology is gonna show the benefits, and then gonna just say, hey, you're gonna be supported throughout. Some of the other ones, to make sure that technology is compatible with your current systems and processes. You can have this whiz bang thing, but if you're still doing paper stuff, like, hey, that might not be the best time. Maybe you start building up slower. But also say, make sure that the new technology meets the needs and requirements of the business, and that the benefits of that will outweigh the costs. And that's to your point of the prior conversation, Dan, about the tax credits. Like, make sure what you're doing. So that'd be make sure what you're doing is worth the effort. For me, one of the things I've seen in implementing is really about data security and privacy concerns. Those have to be addressed right off the bat to protect sensitive financial information. There's a lot of, even in the US with California, some privacy laws that are higher standards than maybe some other states. Of course, you have international in Europe that's very stringent there. So you have to make sure you're implementing a solution that it will address all of those, particularly if you're taking credit card informations or anything that's sensitive that's flowing through. And then lastly, I would say keeping up with the rapid pace of technology advancements and that consistent updating and upgrading of systems, that can be a challenge for companies, particularly, I know we're moving on the cloud-based systems, but remember in the day when we used to have on-prem services, like you'd have to pay for these upgrades and we're like, oh no, we're not going to upgrade it. And then like 3 years from now, it's like, well, we're not supported. So things like that can be challenges as we think about implementing new systems, if you don't go full on in the cloud.
Maybe one follow-up, Thomas. I'll start with you, and then Dan, I'd love to hear your experiences too. So we talked a lot about getting buy-in, right, for automation, a little bit more from kind of leadership perspective, understanding, demonstrating the ROI, but as well as significant stakeholders. What about from an employee perspective, for those that essentially could be impacted by the automation and potentially may create some fear about job security? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Tony. Undoubtedly, that's a big part of the piece, a big piece of the puzzle, basically. But I would say, listen, as accounting leaders, it is essential that we communicate the benefits of the automation to our employees or any stakeholders. We have to emphasize that it's going to free up time to focus on those higher level tasks. It's going to increase accuracy and it's going to reduce errors. So it's important to address the employees' concerns head on around job security. But we have to highlight, as part of the path into this new technology, highlight how the automation can increase the overall efficiency of the team. And that would lead to growth opportunities, which will create new jobs. So, if you're not, typing on the keyboard data entry, maybe you could do something else that will lead to a career advancement. And ultimately, that might be what the employee is looking for. Furthermore, I mentioned in the prior comment there about providing the training and development opportunities for employees to acquire those new skills required, because as you move into the automation, you want to make sure that you're supporting your team in not only that new technology, but how it fits overall into the company. That should help alleviate any fears around job security. And then so I think, by acknowledging and addressing these concerns, accounting leaders can really create a more positive and supportive work environment that would embrace automation and it would highlight the benefits that would bring to both the organization and the employees themselves.
No, you got it perfect, Thomas. It's incumbent for leadership to really, like I said before, like show the vision of what is this automation doing, what is this technology doing, and being very transparent with like what you believe the outcomes will be. And I think it's getting the employees on board of what's the future of their role look like, and most of the time the future of the role is a more interesting role, a more satisfying role, a role that is up level, like especially like if you think about the mundane tasks that are repetitive. What if I had an employee, and I kind of think about it this way, if I had an employee that does AP and you're automating a piece of the AP, would that look different to the employee if I said, I'm going to hire someone to do those tasks for you that you manage? That seems different in their mind than what automation would look like. But automation is the same thing. There's a new system that is going to be doing those tasks that employee is managing, and that employee now is freed up to do the more value-added tasks of thinking strategically, for like looking at pattern recognition, patterns that are happening in the business, giving us alerts about what's happening on their side of the business. And so it's really interesting also. A point that I just kind of jumped into my head was when I first started in accounting, or even like the generation before me, it was floors and floors of accountants, floors and floors of AP clerks that were at these large Fortune 500 companies. Now, if you kind of transported, 30 years later, 40 years later, AP teams have shrunk, accounting teams have shrunk, but the work that we're doing is more complex. We have more visibility into the data. We are giving more strategic notes on what's going on in the business. And I think the new technology from a ChatGPT or an AI and what happens in the next decade or 2 decades will continue that. So like the roles of accounting in the future will be more related to those strategic points of view, like understanding what's going on in the business, things like that. So when I chat with my team, I really try to train them, and I think leadership needs to develop and train the employees for what's to come in accounting, and it sounds like that's what you're doing with Thomas, like to make sure that they understand the systems, how the systems are going to be met. But I also think about like what's the next step for an accountant too, and it's really like, can we train this accountant for communication skills, like presentation skills, telling the story of the data, how do they work inside the systems, even do they understand the technology that's coming about? So that's it's really painting that picture for the employee, showing that vision, and hopefully and supporting them as they go up level and kind of create new skills for that higher value added work that they're going to do.
Dan, I love that. To your point earlier, be a part of the solution. Everyone's being a part of the solution. And one of the questions was, hey, if we already have an ERP, how can we make it better? Well, I'll give you an example. A lot of the cloud accounting software have like bolt-on products. So let's say you have the standard, I'll mention Oracle, NetSuite, keep mentioning it, but if you had your own cloud-based solution, you could bolt on payroll to that. You could bolt on AP processes. You could bolt on tax software. So you can always like pivot into what your business uses the most. The way that's built, again, it's way more efficient than on-prem stuff because it's everyone's getting the same updates, et cetera. So I would say, to answer that question, how do you make the ERP more efficient? Look at where you're spending the most time and look out into the marketplace for a solution that can be bolted on, because if there is a path to be more efficient, someone has thought of a way to do that. And it doesn't have to be a homegrown thing. There's probably something already out there that could bolt on.
Yeah, totally. And that's the benefits of these cloud-based systems, right? They're becoming ubiquitous, and there's a lot of these bolt-ons or applications that have been built specifically for these systems, and that's what is really interesting in this moment. And do you build an application or do you buy an application? And a lot of times what's out on the market is 90% there. And then, you just use someone from a consulting standpoint to like get you the extra 10%. And so more and more and more, there's probably less of a need of an in-house developer as these systems become more refined, ubiquitous, and flexible. And I think that's the future of these ERP systems. From back in the day, it was a mainframe, and then once you have that system, you have PeopleSoft. You're going to have that PeopleSoft system for 20 years, and it's going to look like that exact same system 20 years from now. Now everything is updating faster. Everyone has these bolt-ons that you can do, and so I'm really excited to see innovation in that field of ancillary products that you can like add to the ERPs.
I like that, Dan. That's one of the first things I ask my developer when we have an issue come up and they say, hey, we have a solution. Is this repeatable? Can someone else pick up this code, this script that you've written in here and run with it? Or does someone have to spend 30 minutes to 3 hours to figure it out? Because that's how, when you used to have, back in the day, when have, well, I guess even today, there's homegrown systems that just like the coding, just people don't code in the same way. They don't comment things out to write like, this is what this is what this script of coding means. So it's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of turnover and stuff. So that whole thing that you said, Dan, about make sure it is understood by all and is repeatable and easily understood and enhanced in the future makes total sense.
That's super helpful. And we just got a question for the audience I would pose to you. And I guess I'll start with you, Dan. The question is, there are so many options for business intelligence software. Which tools or system would you recommend for small organizations that are not overwhelming for staff? So curious on you can start, Dan, and curious on your view too, Thomas.
Yeah, I think some of the applications that we discussed, even Power BI or Tableau, or there's a Looker app. A lot of these things are not extremely expensive for the end user, and like they'll work with you from a scaling perspective. So like they have scale from a 5-person accounting team or 2-person accounting team all the way up to the Netflix and Googles of the world. And so like these systems do allow for a massive scale. You get to benefit from constant innovation from those sides. It all depends on what data you have to put into the system. So really look at the data you have. And at the end of the day, I don't think Excel is the worst. Like I still do a lot of work in Excel. I've trained my team on Python as well. So like there's a lot of application you can do in Python from a data manipulation side. Python actually has a lot of tool sets, just like we were talking about, where you can like kind of add on applications and things like that. There's a lot of native code inside Python that you can kind of use to manipulate data in new and expressive ways. And even if you have a large amount of data and a small team, there's machine learning algorithms that you can use from Python to really drive a lot of new analysis in a creative and unique way.
Yeah, Dan, I think you hit on it right there. I was going only to echo it a little bit further, but say that Power BI and Tableau are two of my recommendations. And since the question came and specifically mentioned small organizations, I'm with Dan there that Excel is not the worst in the world. But what's cool about Power BI and Tableau is you can use your existing Excel items and upload that into these software products, and it will visually represent it. So you don't have to be like a full cloud-based solution software. You could still use Excel and still want to do reporting out of Power BI and Tableau, which are relatively inexpensive, and just have that as like, hey, I'm going to do some of this stuff in Excel, and I'm going to load it up into Tableau or Power BI, and I'm going to present it in a way that is more visually friendly to the executive team.
And also with Excel, just hot off the press is Excel with ChatGPT is amazing. Excel, they're going to have the autopilot or the copilot with Microsoft. And so there's these versions of it where like you can get into the VBA code and change the VBA code in order to manipulate data in new, interesting ways. These ChatGPTs will tell you how to create the actual formula. So now you have someone who's a elementary Excel user can turn into a Power Excel user if they just know how to write the prompts in ChatGPT.
Yep, super helpful. So maybe I'll move to final thoughts, guys, before we start going to the audience Q&A. So maybe Thomas, will start with you for final thoughts for the audience for maybe Q&A.
Yeah, sure. I'll keep it brief here. Overall, as leaders, I would suggest being a lifelong learner. Okay, the moment that we stop learning, we stop leading. That's it.
No, yeah, you hit it on the head, and it's I think we're in a fundamental change in accounting. Accounting is really interesting right now. Less people are graduating as accountants. Less people are kind of going to the CPA exam than ever before. I think fundamentally what we think of accounting changes over the next 10 years, and it's going to be really interesting to see what automations happen in the future with AI and more complex thought that is kind of given to the system. I think question A, is, we want to make sure that, there's always a human in control, or a human that is analyzing and reviewing the data. But at the end of the day, all of these automations free us up for more strategic work. And so my prediction of the day is that the FP&A function and the accounting function will merge at some point in the next 10 to 20 years, because you think about strategic finance, strategic FP&A, there's not the same term strategic accounting. And I think there will be at some point in time, as we move up and kind of consolidate what it means to be a strategy professional and what it means to be an accountant. And I think those will merge over the next, course of 10, 15 years.
Super helpful, guys. So maybe moving to the audience Q&A, and Dan, I'll start with you. I think you touched on this, so maybe you can elaborate a little bit more. So how can we show an ROI for accounting automation?
Yeah, you know what? When we think about it, there's a few different ways to do it, right? So like the obvious one is what's the man or human hours associated with the goal? Like in general, how much do we think that costs the business? But then there's a little bit of a soft amount, right? So the soft amount is, what does the increased complexity or decreased complexity give the business in kind of decision-making potential? And that is somewhat, could be hazy, but at the end of the day, you just got to put an amount on it, what you believe it's worth, and you just have to be able to justify it. People are going to ask you how you came up with that amount. You're going to have to justify it, come up with a solution, come up with what you think that's worth, and then fight it. And if someone has a different opinion, bring some of that information into your decision making. But it's basically, every second, every minute that someone is spending on a process costs the company money, right? It's time that person can do on a higher level project. So what does that cost? And then what's the ancillary benefit that are coming about? More decision-making power, less like anxiety over controls not being met, things like that I think you can put a dollar amount for. It's a little bit of an art, not a science, but you gotta put it somewhere.
Yeah, I'm with you, Dan. I think of it like this. I mean, you got to assess what's the need here. I mean, if you want to pitch an ROI for a new accounting system, I mean, is your current system broken? I mean, is it not supported? Is there problems with it? Like if you have a homegrown system or something like that, that makes the ROI almost, I wouldn't say irrelevant, but if you are forced to do something and you need to move and shift, then that would be a more compelling ROI. For example, if you're having your developers have to work on your legacy system for hours during month end, that is a financial risk. Okay, particularly if you're a public company, you cannot be taking that sort of risk. So that kind of sets a level to ROI. Like, hey, we're going to pitch the ROI. It's going to save some time, but ultimately we're going to need to do this. Also, what do you want to shift your people to do? So if you've got a group of 10 accountants and maybe financial analysts, and you think, hey, we've got some growth mechanism that's coming into the business, maybe an influx of capital, maybe an acquisition or a merger. And you say, well, I can get there with these 10 people. Well, what do I need to do that? And maybe that is yours. I need to automate some things. Okay, well then we're going to put that in the ROI, and that will not be a ROI of I will reduce headcount. It will be an ROI of I need to increase bandwidth to capture this additional revenue. So it really, like, what is the need, and then you start there, and then you build your pitch. Sometimes it's not going to be a money making situation. It's just going to be a compliance situation. Other times it's going to be a need out of needing to grow the business.
Yeah, and just to jump on that, like from sometimes where it's non-monetary, the example I can think about is like we're a public company, time to close. So like, it can we cut a day off the close? Can we take 2 days off the close? What is the monetary impact of that? It's probably very uncertain, but it's worth infinite money to the CFO. It's worth infinite money to the controller, who, you know, has only a certain amount of days in order to prepare for earnings calls and things like that. So at the end of the day, you know, if you can't put an amount to it, put a feeling to it, you know, put it like, what would you pay for this this value? If I could give you an extra day to prepare for earnings call, what would you pay for that? And that's kind of where you're going to end up from a ROA standpoint.
That's really helpful. And then another question has come in, change it up a little bit. The question was around how much effort goes into automating these processes from a resource, time, and capital perspective. Maybe Thomas, I can start with you. Maybe you can talk a little bit about if somebody hasn't done an NetSuite implementation. Kind of what's the first step in that process? How should they think through it, and how should they think through it from a resource, time, and capital perspective?
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the thought is, you know, the question is, how do you think about it as far as a resource? So, I mean, I would recommend when you start to do a financial implementation, you always want to have a really great project manager, and you want to have really great subject matter experts. You know, that coupled with a competent executive sponsor will get you 90% of the way. Okay, because that will allow you to pitch it to consultants and have a full scope effort. Because when the consultant comes in, they're gonna scope out the project. You want to have everything up front, because you don't really want to have a scope creep as you go through there. What else, Tony? What were the other questions? There was a couple bolt-on questions to that.
And from a time perspective, when you think about it, I know you mentioned earlier in commentary, it probably takes twice as long as you think, but maybe just kind of this is the first initiative for somebody. How should they think about it?
Yeah, I would say add on 3 months to whatever you think is going to happen. But ultimately, that's a part of having, what I mentioned at the very beginning, a good project manager and good subject matter experts. Because once you get into that scoping environment, that scopes out, there is a whole project plan. And so that is the different phases. So really, it becomes a partnership between your team and then the consultant firm that you'll undoubtedly have to use to implement the cloud-based solution. And then again, I mean, in my opinion, you add 3 months to that thing. But that's how I would think about it. And as far as the timing, it really depends on how, you know, the timing sometimes comes down to money. So if you have enough money, timing doesn't matter. Because you can throw some more people, but it depends on what's going on in the business, how many resources you can allocate to this, and then who you can get on board from the consulting firm to push it forward. So, but again, with enough money and enough need, you can get it done in probably 6 to 10 weeks. Otherwise, I would estimate at least 3 months to get a proper testing, because you need that parallel timing. And in that project plan, you'll see parallel testing, and that I would recommend at least 2 months of parallel testing, if not a whole quarter. But it just depends on what you're automating. I've automated commission processing where we were in Microsoft Access and Excel and stuff. That was a little bit more straightforward. The project map, and that was only 2 months, and we didn't really need to. We could have done some offline parallel testing, so that really we didn't need like a full close, which you have to wait a whole month for if you want to do parallel testing. So that's my thoughts there. Dan, you can add on.
No, I agree 100%. It's always things. Technology is interesting. You know, when you're doing these implementations, there's things that come up that are unforeseen. There's never a good time to implement. You'll just constantly get pressure from people to say, wait till after the close, wait till, oh, now it's March, let's wait till the quarter end close. Hey, this thing's not ready yet, let's wait. Like at some point you need to like just kind of move ahead on a project and get it done. When you're first starting a project, and you go out to all of the contractors who are going to help support you, no one's ever had an issue. Like you talk to them, no, there's never been an issue. You say like, what things usually delay you? Oh, it's never been delayed. Like we've done 100 implementations. They've all gone seamlessly. That, I mean, I'm not saying that they're lying, but there's not like you have to take a grain of salt when you chat with a lot of the contractors, and you have to be realistic about like what is involved in kind of getting cross-functional teams on board, and know that it's a slog, and it's for the really large overarching technological changes, it's a long journey, and it's longer than you suspect it will be, even from the start. And there's going to be things that get in the way. You know, economic conditions change over 6 months period of time, and so things constantly kind of get in the way. So I would say like anyone that's kind of taking on an ERP implementation, a system implementation, an automation implementation, just be realistic about the time frame, and allow for enough time to allow for those things that come up. You know, no matter what, they're going to come up, I promise.
Couldn't agree more. There's always something that comes up. So I think we may have time just to get one more question for the audience and guys. And I like this one a lot. So Dan, maybe we'll keep with you, and then Thomas, you can maybe wrap up for us. So how is the current economic environment impacting technology investments for the rest of the year?
Yeah, it's a really good one, because I think it's one of those economic, the way I see it in like in the technology sector, and even in like the entertainment sector and things like that, it's really, you know, everyone is kind of uncertain about what the future, what the next 6 months, what the next year looks like. Everyone is kind of looking at kind of how should we size the companies for growth potentials in the future. And a lot of that is like looking at, you know, across the industry, you know, in technology, you see Google and Facebook and a lot of these companies are thinking about OpEx and how do we do more efficiency. And I know Facebook is like it's the year of efficiency. How do we do more with less or more with the same amount? And I think accounting will be, you know, usually has been somewhat safe in kind of layoffs, but I think in this kind of round, it'll be looking at the efficiencies of the back office and OpEx and things like that. However, on the off side, they're looking at ways to like create more efficiency. And if you're not going to grow the OpEx staff, you have to fund it and invest in other ways. And I think you're going to see more technology investments and less people investments over the next year, as people think about like, how do we resize the companies to allow it to scale going forward? And a lot of these companies are still scaling, they're still growing rapidly. So like, how do you invest now so that in 4 or 5 years, you can do what you're doing now, or, you know, with the same amount of staff that you have now, or just a little bit more staff?
Yeah, good points, Daniel. Where are you at in that cycle, on the investment cycle? So I would say the current economic environment is negatively impacting technology investments. The cost of debt is going up with the Fed increasing interest rates, and cash is king. So companies are managing their cash flow. They're a little bit more stringent about what they want to push out there for cash outlays. They want to hold on, seen as, you know, like an acquisition market, et cetera. There's the multiples are coming down if you want to acquire companies, et cetera. So I would just say overall, it's a paused situation versus maybe 2 years ago, right after COVID 2021 and 2021, it's a little bit more paused, and I'll leave it at that.
Super helpful. Well, I think we're at time. So let me just first say again, thanks, Dan. Thanks, Thomas. That was an excellent session. Appreciate you guys being our panelists. And Nick, I will toss it over to you to wrap us up.
Great. Thanks, Tony, Thomas, and Dan, for such an insightful panel discussion. I also want to thank everyone else for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. Thanks so much.